What happens when two dudes, one a retired Navy SEAL commander in Colorado Springs, and the other a hippie meditation teacher in New York City, get together to discuss living mindfully? That's a great question, because we don't know what will happen either. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with co-hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. We filter all of our conversations through the man box, where we unpack how as men we are expected to act in society, how fighting the authentic human experience is exhausting and damaging, and how mindfulness can help. If you would like to listen live, join Will and John every Friday at 12:30 Eastern Time on IG Live at handle @WillNotFear. We take each IG episode and upload them straight to this podcast. So happy you're tuning in to Men Talking Mindfulness. Now, on to the show.
And I think we're live, brother. So welcome everyone who's tuning in to the LinkedIn live version of Men Talking Mindfulness. John McCaskill here with my buddy and co-host Will Schneider over there.
What's up?
Today, hey, what's up, brother? Always a pleasure to be here with you. So today what we're going to be addressing is the man box. We touched on that last week a little bit and what that means. And we're going to be unpacking that a little bit today. So let me make sure that we are live. It says we're going live, but we haven't appeared live yet. So let me see if there's any glitches we need to work through here.
Good on mine. I see the little red light up here in the left corner.
Okay, there we go. I see it. We're on. So tune into that. Make sure the volume's turned down. So if any comments come in, we see that, but we don't hear the echo in the background. Well, anyway, here we are. Glitches worked out, and always, like we said, raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Second season, show 2, and yeah, man, always excited to be here. Toxic masculinity, man. What is that? Let's get into that here in a second. Sorry, I jumped ahead of myself.
No, that's all right.
Let's start with our grounding exercise like we always do. So for those of you joining us, the way, if you haven't joined us before, the way we do this is Will or I will start off with a grounding practice, and then we'll go into the conversation, and then we'll wrap it up with the grounding practice at the end. That said, Will, you want to flip a coin here, see who leads it off, and then
I'm going to flip the coin mentally, and I'm going to do it, John. I'm going to jump right in.
All right, brother.
So welcome everybody. Welcome. A pleasure to be here with you, John. A pleasure to be back on episode 2 now of Men Talking Mindfulness. But so today we're going to do just a real simple grounding exercise and create more breath awareness, where we're just going to focus on our exhalation. That's it. There's 2 parts, actually 4 parts of the breath. We have an inhale, we have a pause, we have an exhale, we have a pause. And we're just going to work with the exhalation and watch as we exhale and through this breathing technique, how the exhalation naturally starts to slow the body, slow the mind, and just, we'll check in as we're doing this, how we're feeling. But kind of that's like what the breath can do for us, especially exhalation. So this is a great opportunity to use this breathing technique. Feeling rushed, you're feeling stressed, or need to center or ground before a meeting, before an intense situation, before, or maybe stop yourself before you go yell at somebody that's agitated you in some ways. This is a great way to leverage your exhalation in order to calm yourself down and get away from your, irrational emotional self and into your rational and more of a loving self. So find your seat wherever you are and ground your hands on your thighs. You can ground your feet on the floor. Keep a nice long spine as best you can. So instead of kind of like couch potatoing, into your couch or chair or whatever, sit up nice and tall and proud. Hands are grounded. Once again, feet are grounded. Eyes are closed, face is soft, shoulders are dropping down the back. And let's just start with a complete exhale. So you could exhale all the way out the mouth or through the nose, your choice. And empty all that breath out so you feel that emptiness and it kind of like hurts a little bit. And then let's take a big giant inhale. Inhale more, bigger than you typically breathe. And let's exhale out the mouth. We're just going to do a few more breaths like this before we really exercise the exhale, just to get in touch with the breath. Take a few more breaths in and let it go out. If you have trouble getting a hold of the moment and your breath, you can bring a hand on your belly, hand on your chest. Just do 2 more breaths like this. In, breath big. Exhale out. We'll do one more big breath in. Exhale, let that go. Now let's go. We're just going to do 5 rounds, 6 rounds of this. So take that big inhale, fill all the way up, up, up. Big inhale. So you feel that whole balloon of your breath filling the hips, the chest, all the way to the top of the neck. And then hold that breath just for a second. And consciously and mindfully, very slowly exhale out the nose. Really long. Keep going. Keep going. Exhale, exhale, exhale. Let's shape this breath a little bit more. Let's take a big inhale for 5 seconds. Inhale, inhale, inhale. Keep going, keep going. And we're going to exhale. Pause at the top. Stay here. And really slowly, for the count of 7, exhale out nice and slowly. And really, not even at the beginning of the exhale, everything is nice and smooth all the way to the end. And let's just do a couple more. Inhale, big breath. Feel the chest and the ribs expand, the belly, torso expands. Hold just for a moment. And this hold at the top here is just that mindful moment that instead of just being reactive, I can make a choice and I can respond and exhale, let it go slowly. And even smoother than the one you found the 2 previous breaths before. Okay, let's just do a couple more. Inhale. Exhale very slowly. Just feel that natural falling and dropping sensation and grounding within the exhalation itself. We'll do one more. Inhale really big. Inhale, inhale, more and more. Yeah, pause. Take that pause so you can make that conscious shift to a smooth exhale and let it go out through the nose. And come back to a smooth, natural breath. And just check in for a moment and just see how you're feeling. Be aware of your body sitting here in this moment. And then check in how you're feeling emotionally. You feel more relaxed, more calm, maybe still a little agitated, but less agitated or less frustrated, or whatever's going on for you. It's just important to get in touch and be aware. And the breath is always an incredible tool to find yourself here and now and become aware of yourself physically and emotionally. Let's just one cleansing breath together. Take a big breath in. And a big exhilarating sigh out the mouth. Yeah, good. I am primed, John. Excellent. How you feeling now?
I'm feeling great, man. And I love, actually, that's one of my favorite practices there is where you're really focusing on the exhalation and making it longer than the inhalation. And I mean, yes, it definitely calms you down, right? Just thinking about the breath, focusing on the breath, but then the physiological side of it is by making that exhalation longer, you're engaging the vagus nerve and tapping into the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms us down. And I just came off, another meeting, and prior to that, another meeting, and my days already getting the best of me, and taking that 2-3 minutes or however long that was to just do a breathing drill. Even though I teach mindfulness meditation, sometimes I need to be reminded by a buddy of mine to just take a breath, and bring your heart rate back down, bring your focus back onto something that's important, and just settle your mind. So
well, I think it's important to mention,
practice.
You bring up a great point. It is a practice. It's not an idea. It's not a thought. It's just not like a vision or something to attain. It's like, it is like the only way we get there is actually by practicing and actually doing it,
Right.
And it's just like, you can just do 2-3 minutes just like this, and all of a sudden it's like, and the more you practice, and we always talk about practice on our podcast, the more you're going to get to know the practice and know yourself and know the power of that particular practice and how it can really begin to shift your mind, shift your mood, and shift the moment. So
yeah, 100%, man, 100%. So that said, man, this episode is about toxic masculinity and kind of how men have been taught to view everything through this specific man box. And I want to get into that, man. So let's define what toxic masculinity is, and then unpack that man box, and we have a slide that we'll talk through. That slide specifically is from not ours. It is Tony Porter's from his TED Talk that we'll get into here as well. But I just want to make sure we give credit where credit is due. Great TED Talk that Tony Porter did on toxic masculinity and the man box. And yeah, man, toxic masculinity. What is it?
Notes, and we'll include the link in the show notes. Tony actually has a book and an organization, and CEO is a call to men. Which we're going to try to bring him on the show. So Tony, if you're out there listening, we're looking for you to come on in April or May.
I'm going to tag him right now, man. I'm going to see if I can do that. Tag him.
Exactly. Tag him. I'll just keep going. So, so Tony, and he's been doing this work for 20 years, which is really impressive. His TED Talk dates back to 2010. So he's like really on the frontier of helping men wake up to toxic masculinity. Which is toxic masculinity is the oppressive. What I feel toxic masculinity is, and I'm sure you can define it in a few ways, is an oppressive set of masculine values that limits any man's full potential. It is what I would like to think toxic masculine, and it's also toxic in the sense it's not just toxic to the self, and how how it kind of numb or it keeps us in this box, or it keeps us in this very tight way of doing things. And we can't, Brene Brown reminds us, we can't selectively numb. If we start numbing one part of our life or one part of our humanity, we begin to numb other parts of of who we are, which limits our potential. Right. And what Tony kind of put this framed toxic masculinity in he calls it the man box, which are these oppressive values that he kind of that he spills out. So what are your thoughts on toxic masculinity, John?
I mean, we talked about it a little last season. So, if you're just joining us for this season, this is our second season. And this is a podcast, and it was an Instagram live event last season, but now we just migrated over to LinkedIn Live. But what we talked about last season is kind of the expectations of society on what a man should be, and what is masculine and what is not, and what feelings and emotions are okay for a man to display and what feelings and emotions are not. And I think that toxic masculinity, and Tony again references this in his TED Talk, and we kind of mentioned it last season, is the only acceptable emotion for a man to display, it, again, looking through this man box, is anger or aggression. You can't be sad, because sad is a feminine emotion. You can't be joyful, express any type of happiness, because that's a feminine emotion, which is, we know that's completely untrue, but that's just a weird way that things have been in the past. And I like to see that, Tony has a book out. We've got other guests coming on in the next few months that have written books about a similar topic or a separate aspect of toxic masculinity. But we see that society is changing, and that it is okay to not be a fake masculine man, but to be a human being. And we're all human beings, and that we all have these emotions. And not only do we have these emotions, but we have the right to have these emotions. Yeah. We have the right to express these emotions. Yeah. And I think that's very important. And coming from the special operations community, there is even a further kind of beating your chest. And I'm not knocking the special operations community. I love my brothers and sisters in the special operations world. But there is a kind of a what do we call it last season? False bravado where, hey, you have to kind of beat your chest before you do anything. Hey, listen, I'm so tough. There's nothing that can penetrate my shield of armor. But
Yeah.
that's not at all true. Again, we're human beings, and where that toxic masculinity in special operations community, at least, where it kind of comes to where there's a wall and suddenly people can express their emotions, is unfortunately when we lose a brother or sister on the battlefield. Um, we all suddenly open up and express sadness and shock and mourning and grief and um, guilt and shame, and then after some period of time, suddenly the toxic masculinity coat of armor gets put back on, and then we go back about our business. But that's a little bit how I feel about what toxic masculinity is in society, what it is to me, and what it is in manhood.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of God. I just really had this image when you're saying, okay, well, something terrible happens to somebody that, in special forces, in your platoon, squadron, whatever. I'm not that familiar with the terms, but then all of a sudden there's this. Now you're allowed to emote because of an event, right? And then then we just go right back. After that, it's kind of run its course enough, or like the next day, like, you know what I mean? Or it's almost like I feel like there's a defined time. It's like you have 6 hours, 6 hours to let it all out, and then you put the bad habit back on. You put the bad, but you imbue those habits, and therefore you just put yourself back in a man box. And I say it all the time on the show. It's like, Dale Carnegie reminds us that we're not dealing with rational beings, we're dealing with emotional beings. And, if you're only really exercising anger, dominance, or, aggression, or whatever other masculine man box values are rewarded, then, what else are you missing in the world? What else are you missing in your relationships, in your work? The creativity that comes, like, I think I get really into a wonderful creative flow because I'm fully emotionally alive. Like, I mean, what is, like, if I'm only going to be aggressive, anger, and dominant, or prideful, what is that doing to my creativity? What is that doing to the work and the relationships and the things I'm doing in my life, in my business and everywhere else? So
absolutely, man. And so I've got a little girl and a little boy, children, and another little girl on the way. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, but specifically with my little girl and my little boy. My little girl paints, my little girl, plays with dolls, and then my little boy, he's only 1, but he's almost 2. But he picked up a doll the other day, and I was like, what are you doing? And then I was like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Why am I responding to that the way that I am? Hey, if he wants to pick up a doll and play with that, and then be creative from that, and what am I teaching him? Again, he's only 2 years old. What am I teaching him by going in and being like, hey, don't play with a doll? That's just so stupid on my part. And I got to also highlight the fact that when I say the word stupid these days, my 4-year-old little girl, she's like, Daddy, that's a bad word. So so it really rings out in my head every single time I say it. So but anyway, man, there's so much that by propagating these toxic masculinity thoughts, not only are we really hurting the men in our lives, but what are we doing to the women in our lives? If we propagate these emotions and beliefs, what are we saying about the female gender? What are we saying about women in general? Who are we saying they are in our lives? And who are we saying they are in society by propagating these toxic masculinity thoughts? So that said, man, I'd love to, if this works, I'm going to try to share the man box that Tony put together, and then we can talk through it. Let's see here.
Well, I love that you're bringing up, while it's coming up, John, I love that you're bringing up women in this conversation as well, because, like, we're all in a relationship, and we're all human beings, and, and it's like, what do we do by, taking on these beliefs? And, and Tony, I think he says it's like the socialization of men. and
Yeah,
here's the man box.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
I'll read through them. So what John and I decided to do is, bring awareness first to like the elements here, the man box, and then just for time's sake and respect your time and our time, just to break down one of them that kind of speaks to us or hits us in the heart the most. Even like don't, here's the first one is don't cry or openly express emotions. This is like, I've seen this so much in my family, and I've had that in my own life as well. With the exception of anger we talked about. Don't show weakness or fear. Demonstrate power or power control, especially over women. Aggression and dominance, those are typically rewarded. Protector, like that's that puffy chest, like, hey, I'm like Superman, I'll swoop in and take care of this problem, right? Do not be like a woman. Like, I think it's amazing, John. Just I think with this awareness we're creating, that whole doll story about your son, it's like that's what girls do. That's not what boys do. Exuding, I guess, like heterosexual, meaning like I'd imagine even like this a hyper masculinity you might be referring to. Do not be like a gay man. That's because gay men might be considered like feminine or something like that, and it kind of speaks to what's coming up next. Be tough, athletic, strength and courage, and here the last one is make decisions. Do not make decisions. Do not need help, and then view women as property or objects. So this is Tony Porter, and imagine we're gonna actually probably be bringing him on the show, I hope, but also be bringing on his book. And imagine he talks and breaks down all of these things in his book called Breaking the Man Box, which will include that link in the show notes as well. But any overall overall comments before we kind of dive into them individually, John? Anything? Oh, I lost you.
Yeah. Sorry, I was muted there. I wanted to make sure I shared that TED talk for Tony in the comments. But so the one thing that really, there's a lot in that box that we want to unpack. But what really jumps out at me are, one, do not be like a woman, and then the next one is the tough, athletic strength, courage, and specifically there is the last one, courage. So the two, don't be like a woman, and I kind of mentioned this before, is and Tony articulates this beautifully in his TED talk, is when we tell a little boy, hey, don't throw like a girl, or if the little boy is coming to us with tears, and Tony talks about his 5-year-old son coming up to him with tears, and he's like, hey, don't cry, that's not acceptable. You can talk to me when you're done crying, and if you can't stop crying, go to your room. And that's how so many adults treat their little boys, is they treat them completely different than their little girls. And they're like, hey, this little boy is going to grow up to be a man, and if he's going to be a man, he has to be tough, he has to be hard, he has to have courage, and in order to do that, I got to shut off anything that I perceive as feminine. And so, do I perceive crying as feminine? Do I perceive playing with a little doll as feminine? That there's definitely things that we need to do as parents, or as adults, or as adults in general, whether we're parents or not, to address what little boys, what young men are learning about what is acceptable. The next piece there is,
jump in 1 second, John.
Man.
What you're saying is, and then you're saying, or I love that there's like a natural correlation. It's like being feminine is weak.
Right.
And it's right. Like, whoa, I mean, like we just threw women under the bus. You know what Absolutely. I mean? Like being a woman is it means weak. And therefore, and if you're emotional, you're like a woman, and then you're weak. And it's just like, I mean, this is, we learn this man box stuff that Terry's talking about at a very, 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 very young age.
Right.
I love Tony in his talk. He describes very well of that moment you talked about, his 5-year-old son. And he says, I'm going to give him 30 seconds to cry, and then I'm going to shut it down. And it's just like, wow, at that young age, when the most important man in your life is your father, the one that you look up to the most is shutting you down. So
yeah, that's painful, man.
Yeah, really painful.
And yeah, not only are we, teaching them that that's weak, but like you said, we're teaching them that women are weak by telling them that. And and which we all have mothers, and our mothers brought us into this world, and I can tell you that my mother is not weak at all. She's one of the strongest people in this world that I know. My wife is not weak at all. She is probably the strongest person I know,
Wow.
and I'm sure my little girl will not be weak, and I'm not going to teach her to be weak. And then I'm also not going to teach my son to think that women are weak, because one, he's got a badass mom. He's also got a badass grandmother, and he's going to have a badass older sister and a badass younger sister.
Wow.
So
Awesome. He's a
yeah,
lucky
so
middle child, John. He's a lucky
he
middle
is. He
child.
is. And I've got three older sisters who I think the world of as well. And
Oh,
luckily my father, he didn't have an active role in teaching me the toxic masculinity, but society did, man. I grew up in Louisiana, in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, where playing football and being tough was what men did. And I ran track and cross country, and even doing that, which those are hard sports. Some people were like, "Oh, that's for the weak. That's for the kind of the small weak men." Whereas
yeah,
the real men play football. And nothing against football players. I mean, I love football.
me
I love
too.
my football player brothers. But that's one thing that society taught me growing up, was that men needed to be tough and big and strong.
Well, what does football
What?
reward? What
Yeah,
feeling does football reward?
aggression.
Aggression,
Aggression.
exactly,
Yeah,
and anger,
yeah,
and it's just like, ah, it's like,
yeah.
I think it's so popular because we're watching men, as men, and everybody that's watching, women too, and everyone in between. It's like, it's almost like we transport ourselves into their pads on the front line and just like, yeah, crush, crush, and it's just, I think it helps us to exercise some of that aggression out, but it's like we're rewarded, and it's still. I love football too. I mean, I grew up on football. I didn't play football. I ran cross country as well. I played basketball, which can be really aggressive.
Yeah,
But it's like, I mean, this is like, I mean, we see it. It's built, this socialization of men. It's built into our television,
right,
in a lot
right,
of ways, because it's football, and
right.
it's like we're actually seeing aggression being played out before our eyes.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. So, yeah, so those were the ones that jumped out, and I want to hit specifically again on the courage aspect of that tough athletic
Yeah.
strength courage. Um, uh, I think it takes a lot of courage to express other emotions than anger. So that top bullet, don't cry or openly express emotions, with the exception of anger. Well,
Mhm.
it takes courage to express that you're hurting. It takes courage to express that you're scared. Courage doesn't mean that you're not scared. Courage doesn't mean that you can't hurt. Courage means that you can express those. Courage means that you can have those feelings and then still overcome them. And when I say overcome, I don't mean not express them. I mean, you can have, like, you can be scared, and you can even show fear, and
Mhm.
then overcome that fear, and that's courage.
Mhm.
And showing that fear is courage, and then overcoming it is courage.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
there were times when, in again, going back to my time in the SEAL teams, um I felt scared about going on operation for multiple reasons. One being that, hey, I'm a leader and I don't want to fail. Another one being that I'm leading men onto the battlefield, and we could potentially lose our men or ourselves. We could die ourselves. And the last one is, I don't want to fail the person next to me, whether I'm a leader or not. I don't want to fail the person next to me, and that scared me.
Mm.
But I tried to suppress that so that nobody else could see it. But I'm sure that the other men to my left and right felt very similar emotions.
Yeah.
Um, but they overcame them to get out onto the battlefield. They overcame them to do what they needed to do. And I didn't see people expressing them. and probably, you know, expressing them as you're going onto the battlefield is probably not the right time, but expressing them in general and being like, hey, you know, talking to your brothers later after the fact, or even as you're training, being like, hey, you know, I've got some apprehension about my training, and that says a lot about who you are, the fact that you can express that. And then if you do express openly that you've got some fear, or that you've got some shame or some guilt or whatever the case may be, if you express that, maybe somebody else who's been holding it in will express it, and then you can kind of work to really strengthen one another and bolster one another. So that's the piece. Those are two of the ones that jumped out at me right away on that man box slide, and what I wanted to address.
Well, one I actually want to when you talked about courage, like what came up for me is like one thing that I'm becoming very aware of is where my life can really transform is in the conversations that I'm not having, you know, and those are uncomfortable conversations typically. And I've actually been doing it. You know, I'm trying to get, you know, I love my big brother. You know, we're having a little, maybe he's going to listen. I love you, Chris Schneider. Maybe he will. You know, but, you know, we definitely have, you know, there's a rift in our relationship. It's been going on for a while. And, you know, just before, you know, around New Year's Eve, we talked on the phone, and I was like, Chris, like my promise to you is to be a better brother this year, and have a better relationship this year. And it took, and as I'm just before I launched into that, and I did the similar thing. I sit in this men's group on Monday night. It's not, I don't run it, you know, I'm just a part of it, but I had some tension with the group itself, you know, how we're organizing. And, you know, I didn't really want to talk about it, but just before I did, I feel the heart, you know. I think courage comes from, you know, the etymology of the word courage comes from the French and Latin root of cur, which means heart in those languages. Right. So when we get that, courage really requires vulnerability. And I can feel, I think that's maybe why this box has been formed in some ways, John, because it's a vulnerability. It does not feel great. It does not feel great. And so the reverse of vulnerability is this like hyper toxic masculinity. It's all the sad and oppressive values that we have in Tony Porter's man box here. And right. You know, so, but it's really like, as I bring myself into more of those conversations this year, you know, I'm going to get used to that vulnerability, and by exercising, practicing more vulnerability, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to get better at it, and I'm going to find a way to have those conversations. And already those conversations I'm having, I'm feeling better about my life, my work, everything else I'm doing, because I'm accessing and moving through that courage, you know, real courage, which is vulnerability. So that's,
I think Brene Brown, again, you referenced Brene Brown earlier, but there's I think it was either her TED Talk or Netflix show. She talks about when she sits on an airplane next to somebody, and somebody's like, so what is it that you do? And she's like, well, I talk about vulnerability and strength. And he's like, oh, two separate or two opposite ends of the spectrum. And she's like, not exactly, because vulnerability is strength. It takes strength to show vulnerability or to have vulnerability. And whereas if you put up that shield, it's a mask, and it's that wearing that mask is the easy thing to do. Being vulnerable is, like you said, it's uncomfortable to be vulnerable, and it does take strength to do that. But once you do, it really opens you up to so much more in relationships. It opens you up to so much more in just life. In relationships, somebody knows the true you. You're not putting up this facade, and they can help you if you need it, and vice versa. Now that you've expressed vulnerability, maybe they feel open enough to be vulnerable with you, and you can help them if they need it. So I think it's a very powerful tool to be vulnerable, as uncomfortable as it can be at times.
Yeah, but there's a lot of, you know, I mean, God, power of vulnerability. There's so much power in that. And I think it's like vulnerability and the courage to be vulnerable and the courage to have those conversations or really just sit with somebody, it's like it lights up our humanity. It reminds us that we're both human beings and we don't have all the answers. Sometimes, like in those conversations I'm finding, John, I don't know exactly what to say, but one just putting it out there, and when I say put it out there, it's not just the words, it's my heart that's going out there. And I'm kind of feeling it now as I talk about it. It's like, and just by making that effort, for men or anybody that's listening out there right now, just to make that, to take that step, to be vulnerable and put your heart out there, it just transforms the environment, in a lot of ways, or transforms that connection between me and you or the other person
Yeah,
that you're talking about. And I'm realizing I don't necessarily have to have all the words. I just have to express myself authentically, and
yeah,
so that's like, but again, it requires practice, it requires courage, and sometimes support, in order to make something like that happen. But it definitely
for
makes me
sure.
feel more alive.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, man. It does make you feel more alive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's I think we talked about the book The Obstacle is the Way last week a little bit, and I'm rereading that now, and the vulnerability or the fear of being vulnerable, that can be an obstacle in our lives. And
Yeah.
by overcoming that obstacle, we can get to the other side. I mean, much like in the real world, if we're running an obstacle course and we literally jump over that obstacle, we feel better about things, right? Well,
Yeah.
much like if we overcome that obstacle of fear of vulnerability, on the other end of that, we're going to feel better about things. We're going to feel better about who we are, the fact that we had the strength to show that vulnerability. Once I tell you once you actually do express vulnerability, that's when you realize that it is a strength and not a
Yeah.
weakness, because it takes some work, it takes some guts to show that.
Yeah.
So, well, man, while we've got this man box up, what else jumps out at you there? I mean,
Uh,
I know we've talked about the weakness or fear. We've talked about anger and aggression. What
yeah.
about the demonstrating power control? And it says especially over women, but just in general. I mean, power control. It seems as though if you're not in control, then you're not a man, right? Or you're not
Yeah.
masculine.
I think it's like, control is in most aspects of our lives is a complete illusion, because we really don't, it really is like we're like, we can't control the weather, we can't control other people, we can't control the office, and I definitely struggle with control things. It comes out when I'm cooking with other people. I'm getting better at that. It's just nice to be aware of these things, but it doesn't mean I'm like not an a-hole sometimes. You know what I mean? I'm working on it. I'm working on it. You know what I mean? But so that control thing is a big deal. Demonstrating power and control, because what is when I mean, I know when I'm in control, or I try to maintain control, I'm also trying to say, I know what's best. I know everything, push down other people, right? To lift myself up, to beat my, to that bravado chest again. It's like, I got this, I know everything, just follow me. And it exudes a lot of ignorance in a lot of ways. I think it's also egotistical. I think it kind of puts us like the man, that idea of like the lone wolf, or the man is an island, which we're not going to thrive, and really not going to have a rich and a fulfilling life, unless we reach out to other people, and include
Right.
other people, and when we put ourselves in that, the confines and the man box of power and control, and dominance, which is that part of that control paradigm, and sometimes we use aggression to get there, get people in
Yeah.
line. It's like, what, like, it's like, who are you really serving here? You're not even serving yourself, John. And I'm not
Yeah.
serving myself when I do that, because it's just like, people put up their defenses, and then we're arguing about something, and then like that whole dinner that we're trying to create and eat together, it's all tainted with this bullshit, this toxic masculinity kind of BS that is just getting in the way of our that aliving and enriching experience that we can have as men or women. It doesn't, It's just like, I think it's like we're human beings, John. You know, like
Yeah,
we're all
yeah,
human beings, and we're just wired or hormonally kind of designed a little bit differently in some ways.
right,
But those are
right.
the ones that's the big one for me, and I see it. And again, coming back to the socialization aspect of this man box, that's something I was taught. That's something I see. Men in my family always trying to exude control. It's tough going to the Schneider family reunion every year. It can be, because it's just like, like somebody wants to take control of setting up this or that, or organizing this or that. And it's just like, and we're drinking, and it's just, so it just even gets worse. And, so there definitely, are little rifts at our reunion, and I got to say, thankfully the women in our family are there to be like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, we're family, like,
Yeah,
like, so, uh, yeah, but that's like kind of that's the one big thing that in this man box, and all of these are extremely, extremely relevant, but that
yeah,
power and control, I think it creates bad behavior, which creates bad habits, and it just is not a fulfilling way to be. I mean, like, there's probably a lot of business leaders and CEOs and people eventually or are listening to this. It's like, how can you be more, drop the control and be more inclusive? And
right.
also control, John, it's going to prevent us from asking for help in a lot of
Yeah,
ways. So,
and I think going back to the demonstrating power control and the aggression and dominance bullets, there is a lot of that comes from insecurities. The
yeah,
Hey,
absolutely.
and also going all the way back to the anger bullet. Anger is really a secondary emotion based off of
Mm,
humiliation,
yeah.
insecurity, um, uh, embarrassment. We talked about that last
Yeah, we
season,
talked
right?
about an aggression and dominance
Yeah,
one, and you brought up a
yeah.
great example in that episode about, I wasn't necessarily angry that my dog was misbehaving in front of everybody else. I was embarrassed,
I was
and me feeling
embarrassed.
embarrassed triggered me to be in control and be anger and resume
Yeah,
dominance, you know?
exactly, exactly. I mean, and it was a quick downhill spiral. But
Yeah.
when I took, I mean, this is what the whole show is about, right? Men talking mindfulness. When I took a second to breathe and
Mm,
just take a step back, I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I'm not angry here. What I am is embarrassed
mm,
that I can't even control my dog. And that embarrassment is coming out as anger, which of course my dog doesn't respond to. My dog doesn't respond to the aggression. The dog doesn't respond to the anger. The dog doesn't respond to the facade of dominance. The dogs do respond to dominance, but they don't respond to like a fake dominance, you putting on some fake display. And I
mm,
think that carries over to people. I mean, if you try to do the same thing with people in your workplace, if you try to do the same thing with people in your family, not only do they not respond positively, but it really helps to break down relationships. It makes things way worse than they ever should have been.
mm.
Relationships, I'm sure, have been destroyed for a lot less. And with you trying to be the dominant, aggressive, angry person all the time, that's going to destroy relationships in the family.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop sharing the screen here,
Yeah.
and we'll start wrapping up the episode. Let's see, stop here.
As part of the wrap up, John, I want to say, like,
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of fear in getting emotional, being emotional, having these conversations. And I learned a long time ago that if I really, my training ground for my greatness and at finding more of myself, finding more of more of myself is in my closest relationships. It's
yeah,
because, well, number one, I think it's nice that you have, I'd imagine you have this unconditional love amongst you that, someone isn't going to, never speak to you again, or maybe it'll be a little bit of time, but like, just, you can practice. I mean, we talk about, this is understanding yourself emotionally and overcoming the toxic masculinity and man box. It takes practice. It's not just going to happen overnight. Meditation is going to help with that, but then but that's also kind of a passive thing. But to be more proactive and active, like to have that conversation with your brother or your wife or, your father or your mother or the people that are closest to you or your sisters or brothers, like I think you'd be amazed. Anybody out there that's going to take that step of courage to be more vulnerable and just say you're sorry, or even just say I don't know, for men is really hard. You can practice with the people that you trust and are closest with. And I just want to put that out there because that's really helped me. That understanding of like, you know what, I'm going to transform, and where I can train is in my closest relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only train in your closest relationships, but once you do start doing that, you're going to benefit the most in your closest relationships as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
And that's going to give you the courage to step outside and have that, bring it to the office, bring it to the playground, bring it to the football field,
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I gotta laugh a little bit. If I can just imagine somebody watching our show and going and taking taking what we're teaching to the football field, I'm sure it won't be well received right off the bat. But trust me, in the long term in life, you'll be better served to really stop observing and viewing life through this man box and start viewing it through the human box and having some compassion and emotions that are human. So
yeah, you'll be a better
yeah,
team, son. You'll be a better team eventually.
eventually you will be. So man, yeah, that all said, well, great conversation here, brother. Let's lead into the wrapping it up of the show. Yeah, with the closing practice, and then we'll be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, much like Will said at the beginning, just get into a comfortable position and really whatever that looks like for you. If that's laying down on your desk, if you're watching this at work, go ahead and lay down on your desk.
Yeah, exactly.
or sit it. Yeah, please send us a picture of that. I would love that. Or if sitting or standing is comfortable for you, go ahead and do that. I like to sit with my feet planted firmly on the ground, hands on my thighs, back straight but not stiff. And then if you are comfortable doing so, go ahead and close your eyes. And if not, just soften your gaze and look somewhere between 6 to 8 feet in front of you. And then just bring your attention very acutely to your breath and notice the actual expansion of your belly, the rising of your diaphragm as you breathe in. And then the falling of your diaphragm as you breathe out. Just be very aware of that. Don't force the breath, just notice it. Notice the rising and falling, rising and falling. And then what I want you to bring your attention to over and above the breath is what you're feeling in your emotions. And is there any stress or anxiety or fear that is manifesting itself as anger, whether you are a man or a woman tuning in today? Stress, anxiety, fear, embarrassment, manifesting as fear, or rather manifesting itself as anger. And if so, can you peel back that onion and look deeper as to what is causing that? And would it be healthier to express the fear, express the embarrassment, express the feelings that are truly driving the anger? What can you do with those feelings? Can you talk through these feelings with someone? Can you do something to handle them in a healthier way than expressing anger? A less toxic way than expressing anger? Just be with those emotions for a few seconds as you breathe in and breathe out, noticing that no one is here to judge you. No one here is here to be mean or to suppress those emotions. We're here as a community to support one another, and you are in control of what you express, and you can control how those emotions manifest themselves. Just breathe in, and now take those emotions and imagine them being breathed out as you breathe out. Breathing out pain. Breathing out embarrassment. Breathing out fear. And just know that those are all healthy emotions. And with that, we'll wrap it up with one last cleansing deep breath, deep down into our belly. Start by breathing out all your air. And breathe deep down into your belly. And like we started at the beginning, nice and slow exhalation. And then when you're ready, come out of the practice. Just invite some movement back into your body. Move your head around, open your eyes, kind of refocus what it is you're looking at.
Look at you, John.
Yeah, I know you're looking at me. I'm looking right at you. And also, man, I now the space that I'm working out of is great, but I'm also kind of in an office, so hopefully the background noise from some coworkers down the hall wasn't too distracting.
I didn't hear anybody, John. It was
good.
A good space.
Good. Well, that's I was actually experiencing some fear, honestly, and some embarrassment that, oh no, this is going to come across poorly, but hopefully it manifested itself as just fear and embarrassment and not anger. I'm not angry. I'm not going to go down the hall and
oh, what are you doing talking when I'm on a podcast? Right.
But
dominant, John.
I'll practice not looking through the man box and just being compassionate and empathetic. And hey, there's other people working here. This is not my own office nor own podcast space, so I've got to appreciate what it is they do. So anyhow, brother, always a great time with you here on Fridays. I always look forward to this and look forward to the next episode. I'm gonna take a look here. Don't see any questions, but I do see some comments saying, hey, totally agree, well said, and toxic masculinity is polarizing. It 100% is.
There you go. That's a great
so yeah, and hopefully Tony Porter will tune in, and maybe down the road he'll actually be a guest on the show. And if you haven't taken the chance, the TED Talk that Tony does is in the comments down below here, and check that out. But otherwise, Will, been a pleasure, brother.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, John. And hey, anyone out there, please give us a 5-star review, make a comment on a podcast when it comes out, because that just helps us to spread the word. And John, thank you for today. And so, I mean, this is just always like the highlight of my week, being able to do this. So thanks for this space. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother.
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.